They say when you hear her laugh, it's already too late. That night I heard it soft and sharp, like glass breaking in the wind. It was close, too close. My name is Kojo, and this happened when I was just a boy in my grandmother's village. It was a small place near the forest, where everyone knew each other and no one dared to wander too far after sunset. Not because of thieves or wild animals, but because of her. They called her Abena Sika, the woman of the road. Abena Sika was once a normal woman, they said. Beautiful, even. She lived in the village with her husband and a little boy. But one day, her husband and child both vanished. Some people whispered that they had run away. Others said Abena had done something to them. Nobody knew for sure. After that, she changed. She started walking the roads alone, wearing a red cloth around her shoulders. She never spoke to anyone, but if you saw her, you had to greet her. If you didn't, bad things would happen. I didn't believe the stories. I thought they were just tales to scare children until the night I saw her myself. It was a warm evening, and my cousins and I had been playing near the edge of the forest. The sun was setting, and the elders had told us 100 times not to stay out late. But we were having too much fun. By the time we realized it was dark, we were far from home. "We need to go now," my cousin Yaw said, his voice shaking. He was the oldest, so we followed him, walking quickly along the dirt road back to the village. "We need to go now," Yu said again, his voice sharper this time. He was walking ahead, his head jerking from side to side, like he expected something to jump out. I wasn't far behind him, and my little cousins Amma and Quain clung to each other, trailing us. The road felt longer than I remembered. Every time I looked ahead, it seemed to stretch further into the night. Then we heard it a laugh, faint and sharp, floating on the breeze. It wasn't a happy laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh you'd hear from a mother playing with her children or someone sharing a funny story. It was cold, like the sound of glass breaking, and it carried a mocking edge. We froze. Yaw turned to me, his eyes wide, his face pale. I knew what he was thinking. We all knew the stories. "Let's go," Yaw whispered, but his voice cracked. He started walking faster, pulling me along by my shirt. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The laugh came again, louder this time. Closer. I turned my head just slightly, and that's when I saw her. We stopped. My heart pounded as I looked around. There was no one there. "Let's go," Yaw hissed, but before we could move, she appeared. She stepped out of the shadows, as if the darkness itself had formed her. Her red cloth wrapped tightly around her shoulders, catching the moonlight like blood on the road. Her face was pale, her features sharp, her eyes glowing faintly, too faintly, as if there were tiny fires burning deep inside them. "Kojo," she said, her voice smooth and low, curling into the night like smoke. My heart stopped. How did she know my name? I froze. My legs wouldn't move. My cousins were staring too, Amma covering her mouth to stifle a gasp. Yaw hissed, "Don't talk. Don't run. Just greet her. You have to greet her." His voice was desperate, trembling, but I couldn't respond. Her eyes locked on mine, and it felt like she could see everything, all my thoughts, all my fears. "You're polite," she said finally, smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile a lion might give before it pounced. "But you stayed out too late." Her words felt heavy, like they carried a weight I didn't understand. "I wanted to run, but my feet felt like they were stuck in the ground. Yaw elbowed me hard in the ribs. "Say something." He hissed again, louder. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. Good evening, Ma," I stammered, barely managing to meet her gaze. Her smile widened. The glow in her eyes flickered like a dying flame. "Good evening, Kojo," she said, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "You should know better than to walk this road at night." She stepped closer, her red cloth trailing on the ground like a liquid shadow. With every step she took, the air grew colder. I could see my breath now, even though it had been a warm night. When she was just a few steps away, she stopped. She tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Then, without another word, she turned and walked past us, disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, none of us moved, none of us breathed. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then Emma whimpered, breaking the silence, and the spell shattered. You grabbed my arm again, and we ran faster than we ever had before. But even as we ran, I couldn't stop hearing her words in my head. "You stayed out too late." It sounded like a warning, but also like a promise. When we finally reached the village, gasping for air, Yaw turned to me. His face was pale, his voice shaky. "Kojo," he whispered. "Why did she know your name?" I didn't have an answer, and deep down I wasn't sure I wanted one. When we got home, Yaw told Grandma what had happened. Her face turned pale, and she grabbed my hand, flipping it over to check my palm. There it was, a black mark like a twisted knot burned into the center of my hand. "She marked you," Grandma whispered, her voice shaking. "Abena Sika doesn't mark lightly. She chooses only those with a debt to pay. Kojo, you must not sleep tonight. If you do, she will take you." "Take me?" I asked, my voice trembling. Grandma didn't answer right away. She began pulling herbs from a basket and lighting candles. The room filled with sharp, bitter smoke. My cousin sat in the corner, staring at me as if I were already gone. "Abena Sika isn't like us," Grandma said finally, her voice heavy. "She's been cursed for a long time. She can't step into the next world unless she finds someone to take her place. She marks those she chooses, and when they sleep, she takes their souls. But she wants you because of the debt." "A debt? What debt?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong." Grandma sighed. "It's not about what you did. It's about what's been done. This family crossed her long ago, and now she's come for you." I stared at her, confused and scared. "What do you mean? What happened?" Yaw and my cousin sat silently in the corner, wide-eyed and pale. Grandma ignored my questions, lighting candles and chanting prayers in a language I didn't know. She tied a red string around my wrist and handed me a small pouch. "Hold this. It's for protection," she said. "No matter what you hear tonight, don't open the door. Don't answer if she speaks. Don't even look out the window. She'll try to trick you," Grandma said. "She'll do anything to make you open the door or fall asleep. You must resist no matter what you hear." The noises started just after midnight. At first it was faint footsteps, soft as if someone was circling the house. Then came the tapping on the window. Tap, tap. "Don't look," Grandma said firmly. The tapping grew louder, and then it moved to the walls. Tap, tap, tap. "Kojo," a voice whispered outside, low and cold. "Let me in." I gripped the red string tighter, my hands trembling. The voice grew louder, angrier. The air in the room felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. "She's here," Grandma said, "but she can't come in unless you let her." Suddenly the voice changed. It wasn't Abena Sika's voice anymore, it was my mother's. I hadn't seen or heard from my mother in years. I missed her so much, and that voice, it was my mother's voice. "Kojo, please," it said. "I'm cold. Open the door." Tears filled my eyes. I looked at Grandma, desperate. "It's my mother," I whispered. "It's not," Grandma said sharply. "She's using the one you love against you. Don't listen." The tears flowed down my face. "Grandma, what if it's really her?" "It's not," Grandma said firmly. "She's trying to trick you." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the voice, but in my heart, I wanted her to come in. The tapping moved from the window to the walls, then to the roof. Tap, tap. It echoed through the house. Then came the laugh, sharp, soft, and chilling. I gripped the red string tightly, my heart racing. The candles flickered, and the shadows on the walls seemed to move. The air grew colder, and I thought I saw a figure in the corner of the room, a woman in red, her eyes glowing faintly. "She's here," Grandma whispered, her voice shaking. The candles flickered again. Everything was silent. Then I saw her, not my mother, Abena Sika. She stood in the corner, her red cloth trailing on the floor. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Kojo," she said, smiling, "you can't run forever. Your family has already paid the price for a life once. You can't escape it again." Her words made no sense to me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. Grandma's face fell, and I could tell she'd been hiding something, but she said nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. The room was silent again. The next morning I confronted Grandma. "What aren't you telling me? Why is she after me? What does she mean by a debt?" Grandma hesitated, then sat down heavily. "It started with your mother," she said. "Years ago, when my mother was young, she had met Abena Sika on the road late at night. It was a rule in our village to always greet strangers on the road, especially at night. But my mother had been scared and ignored her. She didn't know Abena was no ordinary woman," Grandma said. "She was a cursed spirit wandering the earth, looking for someone to take her place. When your mother didn't greet her, it angered her. Abena marked her that night, just like she's marked you now." "What happened to her?" I asked, my throat dry. Grandma's face darkened. "I made a deal. One offered myself in her place, but Abena refused to take me. Instead, she agreed to spare your mother on one condition. When the time came, the debt would pass to her child." My stomach sank. "So, this is because of her?" Grandma nodded. "Your mother ran Kojo. She left to keep Abena from finding her again. But curses don't die easily. They wait, and now it's your turn to face her." That night, we prepared for her return. Grandma drew strange symbols on the floor with white chalk and placed bowls of food and coins by the door. "These aren't just offerings," Grandma explained. "They're reminders. Spirits like Abena Sika feed on fear and broken promises. We have to remind her of what binds her here and what can free her." I held the pouch she had given me earlier, confused. "But what's this for?" Grandma looked at me, her face shadowed. "It's the last thing your mother gave me before she left. Inside is part of what she carried as symbol of her own guilt. If Abena comes, you have to face her, Kojo. Not with fear, but with truth. You must show her what she's truly chasing. The tapping started again, just past midnight, louder this time. It moved from the windows to the roof, then the walls, shaking the house with every sound. Kojo, the voice called again, soft and pleading. Let me in. Please, don't you love me? The words hit hard, the memory of my mother's voice filling my mind. I clutched the pouch tighter, trembling. Grandma stayed firm, chanting prayers in the old language, but the air grew heavier, colder. The candles flickered and died. The figure appeared again, stepping through the shadows like they bent to her will. Abena Sika stood there, her red cloth trailing behind her like blood on the floor. Her glowing eyes locked on me. Kojo, she said, smiling, her voice smooth and cold. It's time to pay what's owed. I opened the pouch with trembling hands. Inside was something simple, a small bracelet woven from red and black threads. My mother had made these when she was young, just like I had seen her do for me once. This is why you're here, isn't it? I said, my voice shaking. Abena's smile faltered. She stepped closer, but her movements were slower now, almost hesitant. This belonged to her, I said, holding the bracelet up. She carried her guilt for years, and now you've turned it to me. But this isn't mine to carry. I'm not her. Take this and leave us alone. The room trembled as her laughter rang out again, sharp and mocking. You think a trinket can stop me? She sneered. No, Grandma said, stepping forward. Her voice was strong, unshaken. But truth can. Kojo, tell her what she doesn't want to hear. I looked Abena in the eye, my fear replaced by anger. You're trapped just like we are, aren't you? You're chasing us because you don't want to face what you've done. But this debt ends here. You don't own me, and you don't own her. Take the bracelet and go where you belong. Abena froze, her eyes narrowing. Grandma held up a white cloth, speaking words in the old language. The wind howled, and the candles flickered. Abena screamed as the mark on my hand began to burn, glowing brighter and brighter. Then she was gone. Her body dissolved into smoke, swirling around the room before it was sucked into the bracelet. The mark on my hand burned and then disappeared. The room grew still. When the sun rose, the house felt warm, as if life had returned to it. The bracelet lay on the floor, the red and black threads now dull and faded. The house felt lighter, almost peaceful. The mark on my hand was gone, and Abena Sika was nowhere to be seen. Is it over? I asked. Grandma nodded slowly, though her eyes were sad. It's over for you, Kojo, but not for her. She's bound to the bracelet now, and I'll keep it safe. I stared at her, confused. Why not destroy it? Grandma shook her head. Spirits like Abena can't be destroyed, but they can be contained. We've broken her hold on this family, but someone must always remember the promises broken, or they'll come back stronger. Years later, I still think about that night and the lessons I learned. I learned that curses aren't always about punishment. They're about choices, truths, and consequences. And I learned that some spirits, like Abena Sika, never really leave. But as long as we hold on to what keeps us strong, they can't hurt us again.